This November, Proposition 16 is on the California ballot. It gives voters the choice to repeal or keep Proposition 209, which bans affirmative action in the state. The outcome will affect public contracting, education, and employment for future generations. While there is ample information and discussion about the educational and employment aspects of Proposition 16, the focus of this program is on public contracting and how it affects women and minority business owners. In November 1996, California became the first state to adopt a constitutional ban on affirmative action based on race and gender when voters passed Proposition 209 by a margin of 55 to 46%. Proposition 209 declares, "The state shall not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to any individual or group on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in the operation of public employment, public education, or public contracting." Prior to the passage of Proposition 209, California's state offices set goals to ensure women and minority-owned businesses were included in the process. If passed, Proposition 16 would remove the ban on affirmative action involving race-based and gender-based preferences from the California Constitution, and federal law would define the parameters of affirmative action. To make an informed decision, it's important to understand the affirmative action initiatives in place before Proposition 209. What's happened to women and minority businesses since Proposition 209 passed, and why Proposition 16 is on the upcoming ballot. In 2015, the Cerdna Foundation funded a report on the state's Minority and Women Business Enterprise, or MWBE program, which is managed by the California Department of General Services. The report stated that between 1988 and 1997, the state MWBE participation rate went from 18.7% to 24.5%. However, the 2016 Caltrans Disparity Study, prepared by BBC Associates, found that the participation rates between 2011 and 2014 had decreased to 14.4%. If the 1997 participation rate of 24.5% was applied to the $14.5 billion spent in 2017, MWBEs would have had $3.5 billion in contracts. If we apply the 14.4% participation rate of the 2014 study to the 2017 spending, MWBEs would have had $2.1 billion in contracts, which is a difference of more than $1 billion. In January 2020, California State Assembly members Weber, Gibson, and Santiago introduced ACA 5, the legislation for a constitutional amendment which would repeal Proposition 209. Assembly member Weber stated, "This is probably an opportune time, given people's interest in politics, and given the kind of turnout that is anticipated, and given the fact that this is a different generation, that it may be possible for us to begin work to reverse Proposition 209. In June 2020, 2/3 of the California legislature approved ACA 5 and placed it on the November 3rd ballot as Proposition 16. Most Californians today acknowledge that there is not a level playing field. The February 2020 California Community Poll results on race and identity found that there was already widespread recognition that discrimination was a problem. 75% of Californians believed African Americans are discriminated against. 73% of Californians identified discrimination against Latinos. 55% of Californians identified discrimination against Asians. 70% of Californians identified discrimination against LGBTQ people. And 65% of Californians identified discrimination against women. Most California minorities and women agree there needs to be a level playing field. Both Proposition 209 and Proposition 16 are attempts to level that playing field. Both were intended to reduce the wealth gap and strengthen the economy. This is not a new challenge for women in business competing for public contracts. Here's the history to give you some context. From the early 1960s to the late 1980s, U.S. presidents signed a series of executive orders in an effort to correct the gender and racial imbalances pervasive in federal contracting. The intent was to affirm the government's commitment to equal opportunity for all qualified persons, and to take positive action to strengthen efforts to realize true equal opportunity for all. Here's a timeline of some of the more significant actions taken by U.S. presidents to level the playing field. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy initiated affirmative action through Executive Order 10925, which instructed federal contractors to take affirmative action to ensure applicants are treated equally without regard to race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. President Johnson amended it to include women. And in the early 1970s, President Nixon created a national minority business enterprise, which included women, and set goals and standards. In 1974, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was enacted to make it unlawful for any creditor to discriminate against any applicant with respect to any aspect of a credit transaction on the basis of race, ethnicity, gender, or marital status. In the late 1970s, President Carter created the National Women Business Enterprise Policy to develop and implement a national program for women-owned businesses. And in 1983, President Ronald Reagan directed federal agencies to develop a Minority Business Enterprise Development Plan. Several legal challenges to these orders were decided in the Supreme Court, with two notable rulings of the late 1980s. In 1987, the Supreme Court ruled that a severe underrepresentation of women and minorities justified the use of race or gender as one factor in choosing among qualified candidates. And in 1989, the Supreme Court ruled that a state or local affirmative action program be supported by a compelling interest and be narrowly tailored to ensure that the program furthers that interest, such as remedying discrimination. So here we are in 2020, looking for ways to improve our lives, our businesses, and our country. The question is, will the passing of Proposition 16 help us reach our common desired goal for a level playing field in California? If passed, Proposition 16 would remove the ban on affirmative action involving race-based or gender-based preferences from the California Constitution put in place by Proposition 209, and federal law would define the parameters of affirmative action. While the two sides on this proposition disagree on how to achieve a level playing field, they both do agree there should be one. It's a question of fairness. When considering criteria, in addition to quality, agreed upon standards, price, and customer service, should race and gender be factored into the equation? Is the free market today gender and race blind? Is merit universally defined in determining who gets access to public contracts, jobs, and education? That's the discussion we are having today. Your vote matters to your business. Whether you are for or against Proposition 16, please do your research, make an informed decision, and most important, please vote.